I never knew the road trip would leave a lasting mark on my life. My name is Martha, and I'm 40 years old. It all began when I decided to bond with my 22-year-old nephew, Ben, on a journey that turned into an unforgettable regret for life. The Texas highway stretched endlessly before us, shimmering under the afternoon sun. It was the kind of day that made you want to roll the windows down and let the breeze carry away your worries. Ben, sitting beside me, had his head tilted back, a grin spread across his face as he recounted a story from his last semester in college. His laugh was infectious, and I found myself chuckling along, even as I teased him about how much trouble he managed to find himself in. Before we go deeper, ensure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our true confession stories. Also do watch till the end, as the outcome of this story will leave you breathless. I couldn't help but steal glances at him as I drove. He had grown so much, yet there were moments when I could still see the little boy who used to run through my backyard, his eyes wide with curiosity. Every now and then, he'd catch me looking, and we'd exchange a glance, his eyebrows raised, mine narrowing in mock suspicion, before we both broke into giggles. It was these quiet, shared moments that reminded me why I had suggested the trip in the first place. The road seemed endless, the horizon blurring into a haze of heat and light. We talked about everything, his dreams, my favorite memories, the little things we'd forgotten to share over the years. The conversation flowed easily, laughter punctuating the hum of the car. Then, suddenly, without warning, the car jerked and slowed. I gripped the wheel as the engine sputtered and finally gave out. The warm hues of twilight painted the sky as Ben and I trekked along the quiet Texas road. The car was far behind us, and the faint neon glow of the motel ahead was our guiding star. Ben, ever the adventurer, had his phone out, documenting every step of our journey like a seasoned vlogger. "Look at this," he said, zooming in on a cactus, narrating its supposed history as though it were the centerpiece of some great story. I couldn't help but laugh at his theatrics. "You're something else, you know that?" I teased. He turned the camera to me, flashing a grin. "Content gold, Aunt Martha. Trust me." But then it happened. Ben, mid-recording, took a step without looking. His foot brushed against something in the sand, a rattlesnake. Time slowed as I caught the subtle movement, the snake coiling in defense. Ben froze for a split second before we both realized the danger. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing his arm. We bolted, adrenaline surging through every fiber of my being. Ben clutched his phone, still recording as our feet pounded the pavement. The snake didn't follow, but that didn't stop us from running until we were breathless and laughing hysterically. "Seriously, Ben?" I said, leaning against a rock to catch my breath. "Only you could find a snake to step on in the middle of nowhere." He doubled over, laughing. It's not my fault the snake didn't want to be famous. The absurdity of it all, the snake, the running, his ridiculous comment, made it impossible not to laugh. But then, without thinking, I stepped forward and hugged him. It was sudden, almost instinctive. Ben stiffened for a moment, clearly caught off guard, before awkwardly patting my back. Thanks," he said, his voice tinged with confusion. I pulled away just as quickly, brushing off the moment. "Don't make it weird," I said with a forced laugh, though my mind raced. Why had I hugged him? Was it relief? Gratitude? Pride? I couldn't quite place it, but in that moment, I realized just how much he meant to me. "You're going to give me a heart attack," I said, shaking my head, though a smile tugged at my lips. "Admit it, Aunt Martha," he said, pointing his camera at me again. "You love the adventure." I didn't answer. That hug, impulsive and unspoken, said more than words ever could. Moments like these, the chaos, the laughter, the shared panic, were what made our bond truly unforgettable. The neon sign flickered above the modest roadside hotel, casting a warm, inviting glow on the gravel lot below. As Ben and I approached, the hum of activity grew louder, laughter, conversation, and the clinking of utensils mingled with the tantalizing aroma of spices wafting through the air. The scene before us was unexpectedly lively, a chili cook-off in full swing. Tables lined the courtyard, each manned by proud chefs stirring steaming pots, their expressions a mix of focus and excitement. Colorful banners hung overhead, and the glow of string lights gave the entire place a festive air. Ben paused, his phone already out, capturing the sights and narrating in his usual dramatic fashion. "Breaking news," he said into the camera. "Stranded travelers stumble upon the greatest chili event in Texas." I nudged him toward the registration desk, but my attention was quickly caught by the cheerful chatter of a group gathered around a particularly popular chili stand. I couldn't resist wandering over. "What's the secret ingredient?" I asked one of the cooks, a burly man with a twinkle in his eye. He leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, "Love and a touch of ghost pepper." Meanwhile, Ben had found himself in the middle of a group of locals daring him to try the spiciest chili on the lot. Never one to back down from a challenge, he grabbed a spoonful, dramatically announcing, "For the sake of journalism," before popping it into his mouth. The reaction was immediate. His eyes widened, his face turned crimson, and he began fanning his mouth with exaggerated fervor. "Milk," he gasped, grabbing a cup and gulping it down to uproarious laughter from the crowd. "Why would anyone eat that voluntarily?" he sputtered between gulps, his voice breaking. The scene was so ridiculous that I couldn't help but double over laughing. As the evening wound down, reality set in. "We should probably figure out where we're sleeping tonight," I said. Ben nodded, clearly worn out from the excitement. We headed to the front desk, and soon we were holding a key to a modest room, a clean, quiet refuge to rest before continuing our journey in the morning. Inside, I collapsed onto the bed, sighing with relief. Ben, true to form, reenacted his chilly mishap, staggering around and clutching his throat dramatically. "You're impossible," I said, laughing. "But totally worth the entertainment." Just as we were settling in, the lights flickered once, then went out entirely. The room plunged into darkness, the faint hum of crickets the only sound. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "Ben," I whispered, reaching out instinctively. His flashlight clicked on, illuminating his grin. "It's just a blackout, Aunt Martha," he said with a chuckle. But for some reason, the silence and sudden darkness unsettled me. I reached out, holding onto his arm tightly. "I know," I said, trying to sound calm, "but it's still unnerving." Ben laughed softly. "You're really spooked, huh?" He turned the flashlight toward me, its soft glow framing his face. I nodded, unwilling to admit how much the unexpected stillness was getting to me. He leaned closer, his expression playful yet gentle. "See? Nothing to worry about." I glanced up at him, our eyes locking. For a moment, everything else faded. His smile softened, and before I realized what was happening, our faces were so close that I could feel his breath. My heart raced as we both hesitated, caught in a strange, unspoken pull. And then, without warning, it happened. A brief, uncertain kiss, unexpected and brief, yet electric. When we pulled back, both of us looked equally stunned. Ben blinked, his lips parting as if to say something, but the words didn't come. He then kissed back and told me how he had always wanted this. The room was pretty dark. We did it that night twice. I turned away quickly, pretending to fuss with the blankets. "We should get some sleep," I muttered, my voice unsteady. Ben didn't reply, but I could feel his gaze lingering for a moment before he lay back in his chair. As I lay in bed, my thoughts swirled with confusion and embarrassment. What had just happened? What did it mean? The room was silent, but the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Whatever the answers were, I knew one thing for certain. This trip was shaping up to be far more complicated than I'd ever anticipated. The early morning light filtered through the thin motel curtains, casting a soft, golden glow across the room. The hum of tools outside signaled the mechanic's arrival, and with it, the beginning of the day. I stirred from a restless sleep, my mind still tangled in the events of the previous night. Every detail replayed vividly: the blackout, the moment I clung to Ben, and the unexpected kiss that followed. I couldn't understand why I had allowed it to happen, why I hadn't stopped it. The memory felt like a weight, filling the quiet room with unspoken tension. I glanced over at Ben, who was sprawled in the chair, his head tilted back and snoring softly. He looked so much like the carefree boy I had watched grow up, yet last night had shifted something. I wasn't sure if he felt it too, or if he'd dismissed it entirely. As I stared at him, a mix of guilt and confusion churned inside me. What had I done? The sound of the car's hood closing outside snapped me out of my thoughts. Ben woke with a start, stretching and yawning. "Ready to hit the road?" he asked, his voice still groggy, as though nothing unusual had happened. I nodded, grateful for the mechanic's early efficiency, but unable to shake the unease that clung to me. We stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The hotel courtyard, so lively the night before, was now quiet, save for the occasional chirp of birds and the mechanic wiping his hands clean. The car was back in working order, and as we loaded our things, I couldn't escape the bittersweet feeling that this brief interlude was ending, leaving us to face the questions I wasn't ready to ask. As we settled into the car, Ben hesitated, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by something more thoughtful. "Aunt Martha," he began, his tone unusually tentative, "why were you staring at me so much last night? You kept looking at me like, I don't know, like something was on your mind." His words struck a chord, but I wasn't ready to address what had happened. "I suppose I was," I admitted, keeping my gaze on the road ahead. "I was just proud. You handled everything so well, the breakdown, the trek, the cook-off. I've watched you grow up, but sometimes it takes moments like this to realize how much you've truly changed." Ben smiled, a small, sincere smile that carried both gratitude and understanding. "Thanks," he said softly. "That means a lot." As we pulled back onto the highway, the landscape stretched before us, vast and endless. The miles ahead didn't feel daunting anymore, though my thoughts remained unsettled. I couldn't make sense of the night before, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. For now, I resolved to focus on the road, hoping the answers would come with time. The Texas highway stretched endlessly ahead, the morning sun painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. The air was crisp, the kind of morning that held the promise of new beginnings. Ben adjusted his seat and glanced at me, a playful grin tugging at his lips. "So," he began, "are you going to miss the best chili cook-off in Texas history?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "I'll miss the entertainment more than the chili. Watching you suffer through that ghost pepper was worth every second." He laughed, leaning back as he replayed the moment on his phone. "Admit it," he said, his voice teasing, "you had fun." I didn't answer immediately, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. It wasn't just fun, it was something deeper. The memories of the past 2 days flooded my mind. The car breaking down, our trek through the twilight, the rattlesnake, the cook-off, and, of course, the blackout. Each moment had been chaotic, unexpected, and oddly beautiful. I hadn't realized how much I needed this trip, how much I needed to reconnect with Ben. I did, I admitted finally, my voice soft. It wasn't what I planned, but it was better. Ben nodded, the usual mischief in his eyes replaced by something more reflective. "It was kind of perfect," he said. "I mean, not the snake part. But the rest? Definitely." The landscape rolled by in silence for a while, the endless expanse of Texas countryside broken only by the occasional cluster of trees or a lone windmill. The quiet felt comfortable, even necessary, giving us both space to process everything. I stole a glance at Ben. There was something different about him, a newfound confidence, a steadiness I hadn't noticed before. It made me proud, though it also tugged at my heart. He was growing up, becoming his own person, and I felt lucky to witness it. "I'm glad we did this," I said, breaking the silence. "Even if it started with a broken car." "Me too," he replied. "We should do it again sometime. Without the car trouble, maybe." I smiled, knowing that the car trouble was what had made it special. The mishaps, the laughter, even the moments of fear, they had all brought us closer. It was in those unplanned detours that we found the kind of connection you can't schedule or force. As we drove, Ben occasionally pointed out something that caught his eye, a quirky road sign, a hawk circling in the sky, the endless horizon. He was seeing the world with fresh eyes, and in some way, so was I. The road trip had reminded me of something I'd forgotten in the grind of daily life. That it's not the destination that matters, but the journey and the people you share it with. As the hours passed, we found ourselves laughing over small things. The way Ben had narrated our trek like a survival documentary, my exaggerated fear of the blackout, the stray cat that had appeared at our motel door. Each memory felt like a piece of a puzzle, fitting together to create something unforgettable. By the time we saw the familiar landmarks of home, the sun was beginning its slow descent. The glow of the day softened, matching the bittersweet feeling of the trip coming to an end. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, sitting for a moment before speaking. "Well, we made it," I said, glancing at Ben. "Barely," he joked, but his smile was warm. "Thanks for bringing me along, Aunt Martha. It was really great." I agreed, my voice catching slightly. "I'm glad we did this." As Ben grabbed his bag and headed toward the house, I stayed in the car for a moment, watching him. The boy I had known was still there, but now he stood alongside the man he was becoming. And as I stepped out of the car, the thought struck me, this trip wasn't just a memory, it was a beginning. A reminder that sometimes, the best connections are forged in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more engaging tales like this. Your support helps us keep sharing unforgettable journeys. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel about the events that took place? Which part stood out to you the most? Drop your comments below and let's keep the conversation going.